Imagine, um, imagine, if you will, a scenario where you are placed in front of a computer monitor. You're seated in this quiet, like, completely climate-controlled testing booth, and the hum of the air conditioner is pretty much the only sound in the room.
Sounds relaxing, honestly.
Right, but you aren't alone. Sitting right next to you at an identical custom-built touchscreen monitor is a 7-year-old, and you are both about to compete in this rapid-fire memory test. So the screen lights up.
Okay.
The numbers 1 through 9 flash across the screen in completely random positions, and they are there for just a fraction of a second. I mean, think about how fast you blink. To the person listening to us right now, if you just blink your eyes, that physical action took about 300 milliseconds.
Yeah, which is incredibly fast.
Right. But these numbers are on the screen for 210 milliseconds.
Why?
Literally faster than a blink. And then instantly, they're covered up by blank white squares. Your task is to reach out and tap those white squares in the exact numerical order of the numbers they're hiding. So you stare at the screen. You maybe remember where the 1 was, possibly the 2. But after that, it's just a complete muddy blank.
Which is perfectly normal for a human, by the way.
Exactly. You fail miserably. But you look over, and your 7-year-old competitor is tapping the screen with lightning speed, like tap, tap, tap. Perfect sequence. The whole thing is over in under 1 second. You just got beaten at a cognitive memory test by an animal that, eats termites with a stick. Your competitor is a chimpanzee.
It really forces a complete recalibration of how we view our place in the natural world, doesn't it? I mean, we humans are so accustomed to sitting comfortably at the absolute pinnacle of the cognitive pyramid.
Oh, yeah. We love it up there.
We do. We operate under this unspoken assumption, kind of a biological arrogance, really, that in any test of mental agility or memory or processing speed, the human brain will naturally outshine any other species.
Right.
But you put a human in that specific booth with that specific spatial memory task, and we are just left in the dust by a primate.
We really are. And today we are taking a massive stack of research from Kyoto University, spanning like 50 years, to figure out exactly how that happened, why your human brain is built to fail that specific test, and importantly, what you gained in return.
Exactly.
So welcome to this deep dive into the world of primate cognition. Our source material today is dense, it's fascinating, and it stretches across decades. We're looking at the foundational work from the Kyoto University Primate Research Institute, or QPI, and its modern successor, the Institute for the Evolutionary Origins of Human Behavior, which is known as eHub.
Right, eHubs.
We're pulling from Wikipedia entries, detailed scientific publications, media reports, and institutional archives from, the late 1970s all the way up to recent findings published in 2026.
And I think we should probably define our parameters for this exploration right now
Yes.
before we get too deep. Because the goal here isn't to set up a scoreboard. We aren't trying to declare humans or chimpanzees as universally, smarter than the other.
Right, it's not a competition.
Exactly. Doing that relies on a very outdated, unscientific concept, often called the scala naturae, or the great chain of being. It's this idea that views evolution as a ladder of progress with humans sitting at the very top.
Which we need to just throw out entirely.
Yes, throwing that out completely. Instead, we're looking at the cognitive performance of chimpanzees in human-monitored environments through the lens of contextual evolution.
Okay, contextual evolution.
Right, meaning we want to evaluate each species based on the specific ecological and social problems they evolved to solve. We're analyzing divergence, basically, not superiority.
We are leaving species supremacism at the door. And to do that, we are going to follow the lives of an incredible mother-son primate duo who completely shifted how science views the animal mind.
They really did.
We'll dive into the actual biological mechanics of that mind-blowing memory duel I just described, and we'll uncover how the evolutionary lineage of humans, chimpanzees, and bonobos branched out. So let's start at the very beginning of this specific scientific journey in the late 1970s. Let's talk about the matriarch. We need to introduce you to AI.
AI is such a historic figure in comparative primatology. She was a female Western chimpanzee born wild in the Guinean forests of West Africa around 1976.
Okay.
And she was brought to Japan in 1977. By 1978, researchers Tetsuro Masuzawa and Kyoko Morofushi initiated what became known as the AI Project at Kyoto University.
And the context of the 1970s is just so important here because when I think of ape research from that era, I think of projects like Coco the gorilla or Washoe the chimp.
Are really famous ones, yeah.
Right. The entire scientific obsession back then seemed to be this desperate drive to teach apes human language. It was all about, can we get them to use sign language? Can we get them to speak to us?
Yes, exactly.
But looking at the sources, Matsuzawa rejected that premise entirely. He wasn't interested in turning a chimpanzee into a furry, nonverbal human.
No, not at all. And that's what made his approach so revolutionary. The earlier ape language studies were heavily anthropocentric. They judged animal intelligence by how well the animal could mimic human communication.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It's a fundamentally flawed metric. I mean, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it is stupid. Matsuzawa wanted to understand how chimpanzees actually perceive their own environment.
Right.
He wanted to look at the world through their visual and cognitive architecture, not just force them to clumsily adopt ours. So to achieve this, he and his team pioneered the use of custom computer interfaces.
Which, in 1978, is just wild to think about. I mean, touchscreens barely existed for humans, let alone chimps.
Oh, absolutely. They had to engineer these heavy-duty keyboards and early touch-sensitive monitors that could actually withstand a chimpanzee's strength, because they are incredibly strong.
Oh, yeah, they would just smash a regular keyboard.
Exactly. And by using computers, they achieved two critical things.
Sure.
First, they could standardize the testing and present stimuli with millisecond precision, which is just impossible for a human tester to do manually.
Right. You can't flash a card for exactly 210 milliseconds.
You really can't. And second, and most importantly, it entirely removed the Clever Hans effect.
Oh, right. So for the listener who might not know, Clever Hans was a horse in the early 1900s that supposedly could do math. People would ask it a math question, and the horse would tap its hoof the correct number of times.
It was a massive sensation at the time.
But it turned out the horse couldn't actually do math, right? It was just incredibly good at reading the subtle, unconscious facial expressions and body language of its trainer, who would sort of tense up when the horse reached the right number of taps.
Exactly. The horse was reading the human, not the math. And in primatology, if a human is standing there holding a flashcard, there's always a huge risk that the chimp is just reading the researcher's eye movements or breathing patterns to get the grade.
They're smart enough to cheat the system.
Oh, absolutely. They are master observers. So the computer screen eliminates that human variable. It creates a pure, sterile interface between the chimp's mind and the cognitive task.
And the milestones AI hit on these computers are just staggering. Let's break down what she actually learned, because it wasn't just basic matching. By the time she was 5 years old, she had learned to use Arabic numerals 1 through 6 to represent physical quantities.
Which is huge.
Right. By 6.5, she could discriminate all 26 uppercase English letters. She mastered symbolic representations, which are called lexicograms. So a lexigram is basically an arbitrary abstract symbol on a keyboard that stands for a word.
Right.
So a specific squiggle might mean apple, and another completely different squiggle means banana. And then she categorized 11 different colors using Munsell color chips.
And the Montel system is actually worth pausing on for a second.
Oh yeah, explain that, because I wasn't super familiar with it.
It's a highly standardized human visual sorting system. It specifies colors based on 3 properties, which are hue, value, and chroma. So it's not just saying, oh, this is red or this is blue. It's a very precise mathematical way of organizing the visual spectrum.
So it's really granular.
Incredibly granular. And by having AI sort these specific chips, the researchers essentially proved that chimpanzee color perception and categorization map almost identically onto human visual processing.
Wow. And she even learned over 100 Japanese kanji characters.
Yeah.
Now, I have to point out the environment she was doing this in, because reading this, you might picture a sterile, sad concrete box with a glowing screen.
Right, a typical lab setting.
Yeah, but Kupi Rai built something entirely different. They designed her living quarters to really mimic wild dynamics.
They built what was called the 8 Research Annex. And you're right, this wasn't a standard laboratory cage. It included an 8-meter-tall climbing tower, an artificial river, and native trees planted right in the enclosure.
That's amazing.
And furthermore, she lived in a social group that fluctuated around 14 to 15 members. This is incredibly significant because it mirrors the size of stable wild chimpanzee groups in food-rich environments.
So she wasn't isolated at all?
Not at all. She was constantly navigating complex primate social politics. grooming, establishing hierarchies, managing conflicts. And she was doing all of that while simultaneously choosing to leave that group dynamic to master computer-based cognitive tasks.
She was a complete individual with a very distinct personality. I mean, the sources make it clear she wasn't just a biological robot pushing buttons for food. AI loved to draw and paint, and she apparently did it as an end in itself.
Yes.
She didn't require a grape or a piece of apple to create art. In fact, in 2013, she actually created a painting that was presented to the president of Kyoto University, and the university took that painting, printed it onto a silk scarf, and gifted it to Jane Goodall to mark the 40th anniversary of AI's arrival at QPRA.
It's a beautiful detail. And her cognitive flexibility extended far beyond the computer screen. She demonstrated a tremendous capacity for unprompted problem solving. Honestly, it bordered on elaborate mischief.
Oh, the ACE-3 escape.
Yes.
This is hands down my favorite anecdote in the entire source material. So it's 1989. AI basically orchestrates a heist.
She really does.
She figures out a way to get out of her primary enclosure. Then she scours the area, finds a physical key that a researcher had accidentally left behind, and goes over to the enclosures of two other apes, a chimp named Akira and an orangutan named Dudu.
Right.
And she uses the key to unlock their cages. When the graduate students finally realize what's happening and track her down on campus, she's casually strolling around with the physical key hidden in her mouth.
That's the best part.
It is. And when she sees the students, she turns around and shows them her backside, which is a chimpanzee's social signal of deference or submission.
Yeah.
And then she just peacefully allows them to escort her back to the lab.
The layers of cognition required for that event are just profound. Think about it. She had to understand the mechanical function of a tool, the key, that she had never been explicitly trained to use.
Right.
She had to possess a rudimentary theory of mind to realize that unlocking the other cages would release her peers. Storing the key in her mouth suggests she understood she was holding contraband and actually attempted to conceal it.
Which implies she knows she's doing something she shouldn't.
Exactly. And finally, offering her backside shows a deep understanding of the cross-species social hierarchy she existed in. She knew she had broken the rules, and she immediately deployed a primate de-escalation tactic to smooth things over with the humans.
But this brings up a huge philosophical hurdle for me. If AI is painting just for the joy of it, if she's orchestrating breakouts, hiding keys, and recognizing over 100 kanji characters, I look at that and my human brain immediately projects a human narrative onto her.
Sure.
Does this mean she's thinking like a human? Like, is her internal experience essentially a human one just trapped in a chimpanzee's body?
And that's the danger, right? The temptation to anthropomorphize is incredibly strong because the outputs look so similar to human behavior.
Yeah.
Recognizing letters, using numbers, hiding keys, these are things we do every day. But the neurological reality is that she was processing the world in a fundamentally different, uniquely chimpanzee way.
Okay.
Her skills on the computer were rooted in highly advanced associative learning and rapid visual categorization, rather than the abstract, semantic, narrative-driven thought that really characterizes human language.
Okay, let's break down the difference between associative learning and semantic thought for the listener, because that sounds
Sure.
important. How does a chimp map a symbol to a reward differently than, say, a human toddler mapping a word to a concept?
Think of it this way. If a human toddler learns the word apple, that word becomes a node in a massive interconnected semantic web in their brain. They can talk about an apple that isn't in the room. They can imagine a hypothetical blue apple. They can tell you a story about an apple they ate yesterday. The word has abstract meaning entirely detached from the physical object itself.
Right.
But for a chimpanzee learning a lexigram or a kanji character, the process is generally associative. The symbol on the screen is inextricably linked to the physical reward or the immediate visual environment. Chimpanzees have evolved to make instantaneous assessments of their visual field.
Why is that so crucial for them?
Well, imagine needing to spot a single ripe red fruit hidden in a massive, dense canopy of green leaves, or needing to quickly assess the size, identity, and threat level of an approaching rival group in the forest.
It's life or death.
Exactly. Their brains are optimized for incredible visual spatial processing. So AI's brain was taking those exceptional primate-specific visual powers and applying them to the pixels on a computer screen. The outputs overlap with human skills, but the biological software running the program is entirely tailored to a primate's survival needs in a forest canopy.
So she's using chimpanzee superpowers to solve human-designed puzzles. It's not that she's thinking in English or Japanese. She's using her evolutionary hardware to categorize visual data at a level we can honestly barely comprehend.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, AI passed away in January 2026 at the age of 49 from multiple organ failure, which really marked the end of an incredible, nearly 50-year scientific
A
journey.
truly monumental life.
Yeah. But her legacy didn't end with her passing. Her greatest contribution to science was actually biological because in the year 2000, she gave birth to a son, Ayumu.
Yes.
And Ayumu is where this story goes from a fascinating study in learning to an absolute mind-bending paradigm shift.
Ayuma's birth presented the Kupirai researchers with a massive ethical and methodological puzzle. For decades, they had been studying an adult chimp. Now they desperately wanted to study infant cognitive development.
Right.
They wanted to know how these visual spatial skills emerge from birth. But in chimpanzee society, the mother-infant bond is paramount. A young chimpanzee relies entirely on its mother for years.
You can't just separate them.
No, you absolutely cannot simply separate an infant from its mother to run touch-screen experiments. The psychological distress would be immense. And from a purely scientific standpoint, a distressed animal will not give you reliable cognitive data anyway.
Right, you can't just take the baby to another room for an hour like a human toddler at a daycare. The mother would tear the room apart and the baby would be terrified. So how do you test a developing infant when a highly protective, incredibly strong mother chimp is right there?
The researchers engineered a really elegant physical solution called the twin booth. They constructed two identical climate-controlled testing booths right next to each other, and they were separated by a sturdy dividing door.
Okay.
But they designed this door to remain only half open. The opening was carefully measured. It was large enough for the young, small Ayumu to easily crawl through into the testing side, but the gap was too small for the adult, fully grown AI to follow him.
That is just brilliant design. So Ayumu could voluntarily cross over the threshold to interact with the touchscreens and the researchers whenever he wanted to. But if he ever felt scared or frustrated, AI was literally inches away. He could see her, hear her, and smell her through the opening. She provided this constant implicit approval and a massive psychological safety net.
And it completely altered the learning paradigm, because Ayumu wasn't explicitly trained by the human researchers in the step-by-step, reward-based way AI was. He learned primarily by watching his mother.
He just absorbed it.
Yes, and this dynamic directly mirrors Tetsuro Matsuzawa's field observations of wild chimpanzees in Bosu, Guinea. The laboratory design finally allowed them to capture natural wild learning behaviors in a controlled setting.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah. In Bosu, Matsuzawa had extensively documented a phenomenon he termed education by master apprenticeship.
This is the nut-cracking behavior, right? Because I've seen videos of this and it looks incredibly difficult.
It is a highly complex physical and cognitive skill. In Bosu, chimpanzees use a pair of heavy stones as a hammer and an anvil to crack open thick oil palm nuts.
Like actual tools.
Yes, very specific tools. They have to select the right stones, place the nut perfectly on the anvil, and strike it with the exact right amount of force. Too little force, the nut doesn't open. Too much force, you smash the nutritious kernel inside into an inedible paste.
Right.
But here is the crucial part. The mothers in the wild never actively teach their infants.
Wait, they don't hand them the stone and sort of like adjust their grip?
Never. There is no active pedagogy. Instead, researchers identified a critical learning period, generally between the ages of 3 and 5. During this window, the infant sits incredibly close to the mother, intensely observing her every movement.
Just staring.
Just staring. And through relentless observation, proximity, and eventually their own trial and error with discarded stones, they acquire this skill. The mother is the master, the infant is the apprentice. And Ayumu learned to navigate the complex computer touchscreens in the exact same way. He sat in that twin booth, peering through the half-open door, watching his mother interact with the glowing screen. And his developing brain absorbed the mechanics of the tasks without a human ever guiding his hand.
And because he was learning during that critical developmental window, he absorbed these skills at a terrifying speed. The sources detail his acquisition rate, and it honestly makes human toddlers look sluggish.
It really does.
By the time he was 2.5 years old, he had completely mastered a multi-step token task. So he had to look at a symbol on the screen, find a corresponding physical token, take that token, put it into a vending machine slot, and retrieve a food reward.
It's a lot of steps for a 2-year-old.
It is. And the very first day he successfully completed the sequence, he didn't just do it once, he did it 20 times in a row. He eventually got so fast he could do the whole sequence in under a second. He was nesting cups, he was using stick tools to probe for rewards, and by age 4, he was mastering the touchscreen numeral sequences that took his mother years of explicit training to learn.
He was a prodigy of observation. The neural pathways in his highly plastic young brain were being physically shaped by this digitally augmented environment from the moment he opened his eyes.
But this raises a really important distinction. We see Ayumu picking up these skills effortlessly just by watching his mom. But is he just a really good mimic? Like, is he just copying her hand movements? Or is his young, hyperplastic brain actually allowing him to surpass her cognitive abilities?
That distinction is the exact catalyst for the most famous experiment to ever come out of the AI project. The seminal 2007 study published in the journal Current Biology by Matsuzawa and researcher Sana Inoue.
Ah, here we go.
Yes, this is the experiment that didn't just show Ayumu surpassing his mother, it showed him seemingly shattering the cognitive limits of the human race.
Okay, let's step back into the testing booth. Let's set the stage for the memory duel. This is the masking task I described at the very beginning, the deep dive. Let's break down the mechanics of this test because the devil is absolutely in the details here.
The masking task was specifically designed to isolate and test pure spatial working memory.
Okay.
The setup is this. On a touchscreen monitor, Arabic numerals from 1 to 9 are distributed completely randomly across a grid of 40 possible positions. The subject has to touch them in ascending numerical order. 1, then 2, then 3, and so on.
Simple enough in theory.
Right. But the trick, the masking element, is that the moment the subject touches the number 1, all the remaining numbers on the screen are instantly covered up by blank white squares. They are masked from view.
So to succeed, your brain basically has to hold a perfect spatial map of where the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 were before they vanished, and you have to tap the blank squares in the right sequence based purely on that mental map.
Yes. You were relying entirely on the fidelity of a momentary visual snapshot. In this 2007 study, they tested a cohort of young chimps, with Ayumu as the standout star, against a cohort of adult human university students.
Okay, humans versus chimps.
They began the testing by leaving the numbers on the screen for 650 milliseconds before the masking occurred.
Okay, 650 milliseconds. That's a little over half a second. It's fast. But half a second gives your eyes a chance to physically dart around the screen a little bit. You can actively scan.
Yes, exactly. The eyes can make saccadic movements in that time. And at that 650 millisecond duration, Ayumu and the human university students were tied.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, both species achieved roughly an 80% accuracy rate in completing the sequence perfectly.
So humans are holding their own. The playing field seems relatively level at that speed.
But then the researchers turned the dial. They reduced the initial exposure time of the numbers to a mere 210 milliseconds.
This is the blink speed. Like we talked about earlier, an average human eye blink takes 300 to 400 milliseconds. So the numbers are appearing and disappearing faster than you can blink.
It's incredibly fast.
In 210 milliseconds, you literally cannot move your eyes to scan the screen. The physical muscles of the eye cannot dart from one side of the monitor to the other in that time. You get one single static visual fixation.
This specific time constraint is where the evolutionary divergence became starkly apparent. At 210 milliseconds, the accuracy of the human university students plummeted to about 40%.
Ouch.
They were practically guessing after the first few numbers.
Oh,
But Ayumu, his accuracy remained at a staggering 80%.
no way.
He barely noticed the time reduction. Not only that, his response times, meaning the speed at which his finger flew across the screen tapping out the blank squares, stayed under 1 second for the entire sequence.
Under 1 second to physically tap out a sequence of 8 invisible numbers from memory after seeing them for a fifth of a second? That's just wild.
It is.
And when this data dropped in 2007, it broke out of the scientific journals and just shocked the general public. The media frenzy was intense. I mean, major newspapers ran headlines about super chimps making monkeys out of human intelligence. News anchors were calling it eidetic or photographic memory. It had a massive cultural footprint.
It really captured people's imaginations.
Yeah. Video game developers actually coded the exact parameters of the test. There were PlayStation games released, like Chimp Test, and mobile apps like Chimp Champ. Millions of humans were downloading this exact masking task, desperately trying to beat a chimpanzee's score and failing miserably.
I remember trying it myself. It's impossible.
Ayumu became a global ambassador for primate intelligence, and as he grew older, the researchers pushed him further, testing him on sequences with up to 19 numerals on the screen, establishing a benchmark for high-load serial memory that no human seemed able to touch.
And to truly understand how profound his ability was, you have to look closely at the error analysis from the study.
Okay, what do you mean?
What happened when Ayumu actually made a mistake? The researchers found that his errors were almost exclusively order-based, not position-based.
Hold on, let's clarify that. If his errors are order-based, you're saying his brain actually recorded the blank white squares perfectly, but he just got confused about which one was 3 and which was 4. How is that visually possible?
Think of it like looking at a crowded room for a split second and then closing your eyes. A position-based error would be forgetting where the chairs are located in the room.
Right.
An order-based error is knowing exactly where every single chair is, but forgetting the alphabetical order of the people sitting in them.
Oh, wow.
When an Ayumu made a mistake, he tapped a square that actually had a number hidden behind it. He just tapped the wrong number in the sequence. He might tap the square hiding the 5 instead of the square hiding the 4, but he almost never tapped a completely blank area of the screen that hadn't contained a number.
That is insane.
He knew exactly where the targets were on the grid with near-perfect photographic recall. His visuospatial encoding was phenomenally acute. He just occasionally jumbled the abstract sequence.
So his brain literally took a high-definition photograph of the monitor, stored it in a buffer, and he was just reading the coordinates off the photographs in his mind's eye.
Essentially, yes.
It sounds like a decisive, indisputable victory for the chimpanzee mind. But science doesn't just accept extraordinary claims without extraordinary scrutiny. And the broader scientific community took a hard look at the super chimp narrative and pushed back.
They absolutely tore into the methodology. And honestly, this is the rigorous, self-correcting nature of the scientific process at work.
Which is how it should be.
Exactly. Researchers like Peter Cook and Margaret Wilson, as well as Alan Silverberg and David Kearns, looked at the 2007 data and immediately spotted a massive, glaring variable that hadn't been properly controlled for:
What was it?
the practice effect.
And this is where I get genuinely frustrated on behalf of the human subjects, the practice effect. Ayumu had been sitting in that twin booth playing touchscreen memory games every single day since he was an infant.
Yes.
By the time this test happened and he was 7 years old, he had completed tens of thousands of highly reinforced repetitive trials. He was a professional, elite athlete of this specific visual video game.
Yes. He had spent his entire developmental window optimizing his neural pathways for this exact task. And the human university students he was competing against, they were brought into the lab cold.
Just off the street, basically.
Yeah. They had a brief familiarization period to understand the rules of the game,
Yeah.
but it's essentially they had zero prior practice compared to Ayumu.
You compared a 7-year veteran to a college kid walking off the street and declared that their species have fundamentally different cognitive architectures. Seems like a massive oversight. Didn't any of the original researchers think to just, train the humans first?
It was a significant methodological blind spot. The initial assumption was that spatial working memory is a relatively fixed biological capacity. So they figured practice wouldn't drastically alter the fundamental limits. But the critics proved that assumption wrong. The replication studies were incredibly revealing and, frankly, recovered a lot of human pride.
Tell me about the replication.
Cook and Wilson decided to see what happens when you actually train a human. They took human subjects and gave them 6,000 training trials at the easier 650 millisecond speed. They let their brains adapt to the visual demands. Then, they tested those trained humans at the blistering 210 millisecond speed using 5 numerals.
Did the training work?
Incredibly well. The trained humans achieved 94% to 96% accuracy at 210 milliseconds.
Whoa.
Yeah, they substantially outperformed the chimpanzee's baseline. Furthermore, other researchers simply self-trained on the task for a few weeks and found that their performance steadily improved until they could match Ayumu's speed and accuracy.
So it just took practice.
Right. The conclusion drawn by the critics was that there is no empirical evidence for a qualitatively different, magically superior spatial memory system in chimpanzees. Relentless, specialized training bridges the gap.
So where does that leave us? Does this entirely debunk the idea that chimps process visual information differently? Like, was the initial 2007 study basically junk science, and did Ayumu lose his crown?
It's not junk science, but the initial conclusions definitely required significant nuance. The replication studies debunk the idea that human brains are fundamentally incapable of this kind of rapid visual encoding. We have the hardware, we can access it if we train relentlessly.
Okay, so we aren't hopelessly outmatched.
No. However, even with the practice effect accounted for, Ayumu still holds a very bizarre and highly specific edge.
Oh, really?
Yes. While humans can train to match or beat him on tasks with 5 numerals, Ayumu and the highly trained chimps maintain a distinct advantage when the concurrent arrays get very high, meaning when there are 8 or 9 numerals flashed at 210 milliseconds.
So when the screen is absolutely packed with data points, the chimps still process the overall snapshot better.
Yes. And to understand why, we have to look at absolute working memory capacity tests. When cognitive scientists test chimpanzees across a wide variety of memory paradigms, so not just this one specific screen test, they find that chimpanzees generally max out at a working memory capacity of 2 plus or minus 1 items.
Okay.
That is roughly equivalent to a human toddler. Human adults, however, sit at a capacity of 7 plus or minus 2 items. This is often referred to as George Miller's famous magical number 7.
Okay, let me make sure I'm mapping this correctly. Humans can hold a longer string of discrete information in their active memory, like remembering a 7-digit phone number or a sequence of directions.
Right.
But chimps are incredibly good at these instantaneous, high-density, unified visual snapshots.
You've hit the nail on the head. Chimpanzee memory is highly specialized for rapid spatial snapshots, whereas human memory is optimized for general sequence-based working memory. We chunk data into narratives and sequences. They absorb data as a cohesive visual field.
That's a fascinating distinction.
It is. And this realization that our brains process reality in 2 distinct ways forms the exact foundation of a major evolutionary theory.
Which brings us to the why. If chimps are so much faster at processing raw visual data, it begs a massive question. Why aren't humans? If the human brain is so much larger and more advanced, why didn't we inherit this snapshot superpower from our common ancestor?
Right.
Did we lose it on purpose? Because in 2013, Tetsuro Matsuzawa formally proposed a framework to answer this called the cognitive trade-off hypothesis. And it basically argues that in evolution, you can't have it all.
The cognitive trade-off hypothesis posits that during the evolutionary divergence of early hominids from the common ancestor we share with chimpanzees, humans experienced a fundamental reallocation of neural resources. In order to develop our complex hierarchical language, our capacity for symbolic representation, and our massive cooperative social networks, humans had to sacrifice the rapid, detail-oriented visual-spatial memory that chimpanzees still retain.
So to get something, we had to lose something. Let's explore the biological mechanics behind this trade-off, because the brain isn't just a magical thinking box. It's a highly demanding biological organ.
It is incredibly expensive to run. The brain consumes massive amounts of metabolic energy. We are talking about roughly 6 kilocalories required per billion neurons every single day just to keep the lights on.
That's a lot of fuel.
It is. Brain volume is metabolically constrained by the limits of the human body. You can't just grow infinite brain tissue without starving the rest of the body's organs, especially given the calorie-scarce diets of early hominids.
So imagine the brain as a city's power grid. You decide to build a massive new power plant representing a larger brain size, but you also decide to build 1 million new streetlights across the city, representing language processing and complex social networking.
I like this analogy.
Even with the bigger power plant, you simply don't have the electrical bandwidth to keep the city's heavy industrial factories, representing that rapid visuospatial processing, running at full capacity at the exact same time. You have to route the power to where your species needs it most for survival. The power grid forces a trade-off.
That is an excellent analogy. The environment dictates where the power goes. Let's compare the ecological needs of the 2 species. Chimpanzees live in dense, complex, 3-dimensional arboreal environments.
Up in the trees.
Exactly. They need to navigate tree canopies. If you are swinging through a forest at high speed, you need immediate, high-fidelity spatial mapping to know exactly where the branches are.
Or you fall.
Right, the stakes are very high. Furthermore, chimp societies are highly competitive and volatile. They need to quickly assess physical threats, recognize the shifting moods of individuals, and locate highly contested resources, like spotting a cluster of ripe figs in a massive tree canopy instantly before a rival chimp gets to them.
Their daily survival depends entirely on that rapid, high-density visual snapshot. It's a localized, immediate, highly independent survival strategy. But early humans moved out of the forests.
We moved into entirely different environments,
Okay.
like the open savannas. Our survival strategies shifted completely away from individual physical prowess or rapid arboreal navigation.
Right.
We evolved to rely on intense collaboration, shared intentionality, and long-term planning.
Right.
We needed to work together to hunt large game or protect ourselves from predators.
And to collaborate at that level, you need to communicate complex ideas. You need language.
Exactly. Language is the ultimate evolutionary cheat code. Language allows us to extract the gist or the meaning of a situation and share it with the group. If you have complex spoken language, you don't need every single member of the tribe to possess photographic, visuospatial recall of the landscape.
You just need one person to see it and tell everyone else.
Exactly. One person can explore, return, and say, hey, the water source is beyond the two hills to the north, near the split rock. You are offloading spatial memory into the social group. You are trading the need for precise, momentary visual details in the individual for abstract, relational, narrative knowledge shared by the collective.
And we actually see the physical evidence of this trade-off in the way our brains are wired today, don't we?
We do. Neurobiological evidence, specifically from diffusion MRI studies comparing human and chimpanzee brains, shows exactly this structural divergence. Human brains display incredibly strong, highly lateralized structural connectivity in a pathway called the arcuate fasciculus.
Okay, arcuate fasciculus.
Yes. Lateralization means the brain delegates specific tasks heavily to one hemisphere, usually the left, in humans, to save processing time and avoid redundancy. In humans, this pathway became a hyper-specialized highway dedicated to language processing. We also see massive evolutionary expansion in what's called the default mode network.
What does the default mode network do?
It is the network that activates when you aren't focused on the outside world. It handles internal thought, self-reflection, social cognition, and what psychologists call mental time travel.
Mental time travel.
Yeah, the ability to vividly remember the past and imagine future scenarios.
So we built massive neurological highways for talking to each other and daydreaming about the future.
In contrast, chimpanzee brains show relatively higher structural connectivity in networks related to spatial working memory, motor planning, and salience processing. Salience networks are dedicated to constantly monitoring the immediate external environment for important stimuli.
Okay, I have to challenge this premise just a bit.
Go for it.
The human brain is about 3 times larger than a chimpanzee's. The human cerebral cortex has roughly twice as many cells. If our brains got so much bigger overall, why did we have to literally trade anything? Couldn't evolution just build the new language software on top of the existing photographic memory hardware?
It is a vital question, and it's honestly the main reason the cognitive trade-off hypothesis remains fiercely debated among evolutionary biologists.
So it's not totally settled.
No, it's debated. The human brain is much larger. However, it's not just about raw volume or throwing more neurons at a problem. It's about topological wiring efficiency. Imagine trying to wire every single computer in a massive office building directly to every other computer. The amount of cabling required would take up more space than the building itself.
Yeah, that would be a mess.
Even with a larger brain, there are strict geometric limits to how many long-range connections you can maintain without creating severe processing delays or energetic deficits.
Ah, so it's a structural bottleneck. If you connect everything to everything, the signals get noisy and inefficient.
Precisely. As the human brain expanded, it had to reorganize. It's less about evolution deleting a literal memory module from our heads and more about how the brain's global networks reconfigure their priorities. Humans rewired to prioritize semantic narrative memory over immediate sensory buffering.
How does that look in practice?
When a human looks at a complex scene, our brain immediately, almost involuntarily, tries to extract meaning, apply verbal labels, and create a narrative. When we see a random sequence of numbers, we instinctively try to group them, vocalize them in our heads, or find a mathematical pattern.
Oh, like chunking a phone number.
Exactly. A chimpanzee doesn't do that. A chimpanzee sees the numbers purely as visual spatial coordinates. It's contextual evolution at its finest. We didn't upgrade in a linear fashion. We branched out to solve vastly different ecological problems.
We specialized. We became the storytellers, the planners, and the communicators, while chimpanzees remained the ultimate, highly tuned sensory navigators of the present moment. But this narrative that humans got language and chimps just got fast eyes is a bit too simple, because our sources reveal that chimpanzees possess their own fascinating protocultural expressions of communication that go far beyond just looking at things quickly. They aren't just silent visual calculators.
This takes us back to Ayumu, but now as a mature adult. We've talked extensively about his infancy and his time as a 7-year-old memory champion, but between 2023 and 2025, when Ayumu was 23 to 25 years old, researchers at the eHub facility documented a behavioral shift that was completely unexpected.
He started making music, like spontaneous, highly structured musical performances.
That's right. The researchers began observing Ayumu systematically removing wooden floorboards from a walkway structure inside his enclosure.
Wow.
But he wasn't doing this in a frantic, destructive way. He was deliberately creating a tool. He took these heavy wooden boards and used them as percussive instruments to drum on the surrounding walls and structures.
Now, to be clear, we know that chimpanzees drum in the wild. They hit the large buttress roots of trees to make loud, resonant sounds to signal their location or display dominance. But this behavior from Ayumu was fundamentally different from wild drumming, wasn't it?
It was entirely different in its acoustic structure. The researchers placed microphones and cameras around the enclosure and rigorously analyzed 89 separate recordings of these performances. The acoustic properties were stunning. When Ayumu drummed using the wooden floorboards as tools, he produced what acousticians call isochronous rhythms.
Isochronous, meaning the beats are equally spaced in time, like the ticking of a metronome.
Yes, and maintaining a steady metronomic beat is actually a highly cognitively demanding task. It requires complex motor planning and internal timing mechanisms. The data show that Ayumu's tool-assisted drumming was far more stable and rhythmically precise than any drumming he performed using just his bare hands or feet.
The tool gave him control.
The tool allowed him to stabilize his rhythm. But the most remarkable aspect was combinatorial. He didn't just drum. He systematically combined this rhythmic, tool-assisted percussion with complex, structured vocalizations. He was exhibiting multiple concurrent rhythmic components, a vocal rhythm overlapping and interacting with a percussive rhythm.
He was singing and playing the drums at the same time. And it wasn't just noise, it was an emotional release. The sources specifically note the physical expression he wore on his face during these performances. He exhibited a play face.
Yes.
For those who don't study primates, a play face is a specific facial expression, an open mouth with relaxed lips that is deeply associated with positive emotion, joy, and playfulness. And apparently, this expression is very rarely seen during standard everyday chimpanzee vocalizations. He was visibly enjoying the act of rhythmic creation.
Which leads us to a profound theory regarding the origins of our own human behavior. Researcher Yuko Hattori and her team at eHub proposed the vocal externalization hypothesis based on these observations. This theory attempts to explain the evolutionary roots of human music. It suggests that music, particularly instrumental performance, evolved from exactly the kind of behavior Ayumu displayed.
Taking an internal emotional state that would normally just be a vocalization and projecting it outward through the rhythmic use of external tools?
It proves that non-human primates possess the underlying biological and cognitive capacity for combinatorial instrumental sound making. They have the neurological hardware to merge positive emotion, vocalization, complex tool use, and isochronous rhythm into a single, cohesive, expressive display.
It beautifully bridges the gap between physical action and structured sound. We so often think of human music, art, and rhythm as this divine, completely unique spark that separates us from the animal kingdom. But here is Ayumu, holding a wooden floorboard, showing us the deep biological roots of a jam session.
If we pull all of these threads together, the broader evolutionary theme becomes incredibly clear. While early hominids built massive neural networks dedicated to complex spoken language and narrative memory, chimpanzees evolved their own deep, vibrant cognitive richness across entirely different domains.
Right.
They possess advanced tool use, aesthetic creation like AI's paintings, phenomenal visual-spatial processing that leaves humans in the dust, and a rudimentary but highly structured form of instrumental musicality.
It paints a picture of two incredibly successful, highly adapted species, walking divergent evolutionary paths from the exact same ancient starting point. We started this deep dive by tracing the legacy of AI, the artistic matriarch, who shifted the entire paradigm of how we study primate perception by bringing computers into the enclosure. We watched her son Ayumu shatter human egos in high-speed memory tests, only to realize, through rigorous replication and debate, that the truth is much more complex than a simple superchimp versus human narrative.
We explored the cognitive trade-off hypothesis, learning that the divergence of humans and chimpanzees wasn't a ladder of progress with us sitting at the top. It was a branching path of contextual evolution.
Yeah.
The human brain reached a metabolic bottleneck, and we made a biological trade. We traded raw, rapid visual processing power for the collaborative linguistic superpowers that define our species today. We sacrificed the snapshot for the story.
And finally, we saw Ayumu, decades after his memory triumphs, drumming out complex, metronomic rhythms on wooden floorboards, reminding us of our shared, vibrant ancestral roots. Understanding the chimpanzee mind doesn't just teach us about animals. It holds up a mirror to the human mind. It reveals the specific, quirky, evolutionary compromises that allow you, the listener, to process and understand the abstract words you're hearing right now.
Our brains are brilliant, capable of decoding this audio stream, but they are bounded by metabolism, biology, and history. We are highly optimized for our specific human niche, just as Ayumu is optimized for his.
So, we want to leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. We've spent this time discussing how early hominids biologically traded away high-speed photographic memory to gain the capacity for language, narrative, and massive social coordination. Fast forward millions of years to today. What cognitive capacities might modern humans be slowly trading away right now?
That's a good question.
We are increasingly offloading our memory to search engines, our spatial navigation to GPS apps, and even our complex problem solving to artificial intelligence. If human evolution is fundamentally a story of cognitive trade-offs driven by the environment, are we currently undergoing a new technological cognitive trade-off? And if we are building a new mental power grid powered by our smartphones, what internal factories are we shutting down to pay for it?